Okay, we're back here. I have Ableton open with a few loops loaded, and here we are on the iPad. One iPad app that I actually use a lot is Touchable Pro, or Touchable. I'll just launch it real quick. This is basically an app that controls Ableton, so it's a control surface for Ableton. And this is not a free app. This is an app that you would have to pay for on the App Store. I use this for a number of things. I mainly use it to control automation or record automation into Ableton, as well as when I do my live beat sets, I pretty much launch clips and control effects from this app from my iPad. So this app can be connected via USB to your computer, excuse me, or it can be kind of configured through your network. And right now I have it connected through my network or my Wi-Fi. So let's go ahead, and so there's a few things on here that you can kind of adjust within Ableton or control. This is kind of like the mixer section, so you can adjust volume, you can adjust panning, you can toggle like solos and records, you can adjust the ins and outs, the I/O, as well as the sends and returns, and then it has a master fader as well. Let's see here. And then this section is to control the plugins. So if I open up, I have a few audio effects on one of the tracks. I have an auto filter, so you can control it. If I actually go to the track right here, if you can see it on the screen, you can see that when I move stuff around here, it controls that auto filter. And if I push EQ here, yeah, I can kind of do a sweep or control parts of the EQ as well. And I use this for automation, basically. I'll show you in a little bit. You can also, if you have a synth or an instrument loaded, you can play kind of like how Ableton Push is laid out, like these notes and chords. You can play that via MIDI. Also, it has kind of like a keys layout for like regular synths or whatever. And it has a pad layout, so if you're playing drums or something, you can control pads. I'll just quickly show you that. So I just loaded this 909 kit, and if you can go on the screen, see I'm triggering all the samples within the drum rack. But that's kind of like a cool thing. So if you're like on the road or something like that, and you don't have like a MIDI controller, or you only have your iPad with you, you can use that to control pads. But let's go ahead and show you basically what you can kind of do as far as automation goes. I'll get into a few other features as well. But let's go with this filter. You can kind of see it on the bottom there. Let's go ahead and just record some automation, and then you can kind of see how this works. Let me just kind of set this up right. So okay, so as you can see, like the lines here, that's basically what we just automated via the iPad. I'll play it back. Just let me solo that. You can kind of see it's following what I just did on the iPad. Yeah, so that's like some cool things you can kind of do. If you don't want to use the mouse and keyboard to kind of like set points within Ableton, or if you have a MIDI controller and you don't want to map all like the knobs and stuff to your MIDI controller to control automation, you can kind of just use this app. It makes sweeping a lot easier, and just kind of doing cool things like that to record automation. But yeah, that's pretty much what I use Ableton for. Let me go ahead and put this in arrangement or session mode. Whoops. Let's go ahead and just load these clips up, and then you can actually launch clips from this as well. So if I go here, these are the clips basically loaded. So let's launch everything here. You can stop clips. So you can also stop clips too. So I use this a lot in my live sets where I can just kind of like launch clips, and it also has basically labels to show you what the names of each clip are. So the way I kind of have it set up is I have individual tracks inside the clips, and then I'll go ahead and just like launch them from here. Another cool thing about this touchable app is you can split it. So if I wanted to kind of launch clips from the bottom and then maybe control effects from the top, I can do that. So as you can kind of see, you can split it and control two different things within Ableton. Or say if I wanted to control the mixer section, I can do that. So say if I was playing this and I kind of wanted it to fade down, you can control the fader, as you can see on the screen right there. So you can kind of just use this as a control surface, like a Mackie control surface. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, there's a number of things you can do with this. You can kind of come in. Let me just see here. Am I able to do a clip editor on here? Yeah, you can kind of edit the clips. Here, let me just go ahead and show you the bigger part of this. So here's like the track. I don't know if you can set like warp points on this, but you can definitely slice this to simpler. I think it only takes like 1 shots, but that's a cool little thing. But yeah, that's Touchable Pro for Ableton. Like I said, this one is a paid app that you would have to purchase from the App Store, and then you would have to install like a companion utility thing on your computer, like a program on your computer, and install an Ableton script along with Ableton on your computer for this to work properly. But if you just go to the website, they have proper instructions of how to set up Touchable. Prior to Touchable, I was actually using TouchOSC. And TouchOSC is basically, let me see if I have this set up right. Maybe I don't. TouchOSC was kind of like a controller that you would use for a number of things, like Ableton or Pro Tools or anything. And it had like a basically kind of like what is it called? An editor that you would kind of create things like pads or knobs and everything, and then you would like kind of edit it to control whatever kind of software you're using. So you can use it with Ableton, you can use it with Tractor or Serato, whatever. It would just basically kind of route the MIDI data along with whatever template you had. But now, since I moved over to Touchable, I still use TouchOSC, but I mainly use it for my audio interface. My audio interface is like this old Firewire interface. It's a Motu 828 Mark II, and it does have physical knobs on it, but sometimes I don't want to actually go in and kind of touch everything. So what I can do here is I can control it from my iPad, basically, using TouchOSC. So this is a small little program that comes with Motu, and this is basically kind of like a virtual mixing board for my audio interface. So what I can do is I can kind of control, see if you can see the slider going up and down there. So instead of actually physically adjusting the knobs on my audio interface, I can use this iPad app, TouchOSC, and I downloaded the template for it for my Motu, and I can control like basically all the things on my Motu without actually touching my Motu. So I can unmute things, I can solo things here. So it makes it really simpler to control it from my iPad rather than adjusting all the values on my audio interface. Because my audio interface is a little old. It has kind of like this old LCD screen, which it's pretty easy to navigate through once you get familiar with it. But I think that using the iPad is just so much easier. Plus, it looks a little bit better. I have this older iPad, and it's an iPad 2 that I actually use just kind of like as a static iPad, meaning I use this. This doesn't leave the studio. This stays kind of like next to my studio equipment. And for a long time before Touchable, before TouchOSC, and a few other things, I actually owned a Mackie control unit. It was a physical kind of like mixing board. It was just basically a MIDI controller, but I just wasn't utilizing it as much as I should have. And now I kind of use this thing called V-Control Pro, and it's basically kind of like a virtual mixing desk. If we go here, let me see if this is set up. Okay. So this is basically Ableton. Here, let me get rid of that. This is basically Ableton that I can control, just kind of like a Mackie control unit. So I can push, it has transport control. I can kind of scrub. Here, let me go to this. I can kind of scrub through, if you can kind of see with this knob. I can kind of go forward and back, just regular transport controls. I can arm. And a whole bunch of things. I can control the faders. If you can kind of see the numerical, is this the right one? No. Here, the numerical value is changing right there. I can solo things here. Start from here. See. So this makes it a little bit easier if I'm actually away from the computer. Like if I need to go record something on my keyboard that's a little bit further from the computer, I can kind of just bring this over to the keyboard and arm and everything like that and record stuff. You can also control effects and sends and returns on here as well. So for this one, say this one has the EQ, you can kind of see you can kind of control things via the knobs and the sliders and stuff like that. But yeah, and this also has, I believe, you can kind of look at your screen if you wanted to see where you're at. So it makes it a little bit easy. But yeah, this one's V-Control Pro. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I do have Touchable on here as well, and TouchOSC running on this iPad as well. So I use this kind of like a static iPad. This means it just stays at home. Yeah, it's pretty much the companion apps that I use along with my computer. Touchable I use the most, and then like V-Control Pro and TouchOSC are just kind of like companion apps as far as transport control and adjusting faders and stuff like that. But if you're a hardcore like Ableton user, I really suggest using Touchable Pro. I think it's probably one of the only better or best apps as a companion to Ableton. I mean, I knew there were a few other controlling apps on the App Store that were around. I don't know if they still support them, but Touchable Pro they still kind of support, or Touchable, which was the older version of Touchable Pro. This was version 3. I can just boot it up so you can kind of see the older version. So here's the older version, basically. It's almost the same. You can kind of still push play and stop like that. And launch clips and stuff like that. But yeah. There's just one last thing that I kind of use as a companion thing. This is a companion app, not necessarily for music, but it's basically a remote desktop tool that I use with my iPad here, and it's called Splashtop Personal. So you run a server on your computer, and then whatever you want to use to remote to your computer, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or even a separate computer to remote desktop to it, you can use this. This is the app itself. I think maybe you have to pay for, but I know that the service, like if I wanted to access my computer remotely from when I'm away from home, it's an annual service that you would have to pay for. I think it's only like $20 or something annually, and I can kind of control my computer if it's on away from home. But I also use it for music, so as you can kind of see, it's going to change the resolution of the screen here. So it made it smaller, but here it is on my iPad. Basically, I can kind of go in and control things and just use my computer remotely. I don't use it with Ableton. As you can kind of see, you can kind of move around and select things and do all this stuff here. Yeah, but you can kind of see it on the small screen there. It just adjusted the resolution so it fits a little bit better on the iPad. Okay, so basically what I do with my iPad, and if you're an MPC Renaissance user, you can actually, this might actually come in handy for you. Let me go ahead and launch MPC software. So here I have the MPC software running, and I have it running on my iPad as well. It's just basically mirroring what's on my computer. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the iPad over to my MPC Renaissance. Here, I'll change the camera. So here's my MPC Renaissance, and I have it kind of just propped up on I have my iPad propped up right here on my Renaissance. So you can control things within the MPC software. You can come in and you can highlight stuff if you wanted to. And you can basically turn your MPC Renaissance, sorry, not talking into the mic. So like I said, I have my iPad here. Right here on my Renaissance. Here's the original screen to the Renaissance, but you can kind of mount it right here, your iPad, and then I can control things within the MPC software, and you can kind of turn your MPC Renaissance into an MPC X, quote unquote, a little bit. But this kind of gets you away from using the computer screen. Basically, you just transfer the computer screen over to your iPad, and you can kind of look at what the MPC software is doing while using the Renaissance. But yeah, that's pretty much all the iPad apps that I use currently for music making. The synths I mainly use for kind of music creation. I kind of just record out, and then Beatmaker 3 I use for actually sketching out ideas and maybe composing full songs on the iPad, as well as I use the MPC 2 software mainly to sketch out ideas and then export them out. And then the last few apps were just companion apps to use with the iPad itself, along with my computer. So here are my final thoughts about using the iPad. I think it's a very underrated tool as far as using it as a companion to your workflow or your current production setup. Like I said, you can use a lot of synths on the iPad rather than purchasing like a huge or making a huge purchase on like an analog synth or even a digital synth. You can buy like a $10 dongle and already have a MIDI controller, and you can just kind of hook it up via MIDI and then control synths on the iPad, which is really cool. I do have kind of like this love-hate relationship with Apple. I feel like they charge way too much for some of their products, and you have to buy a bunch of dongles and stuff like that. I think the main thing that's holding the iPad back as far as it becoming like a main kind of thing in your production or just in general being an iPad user, especially if you're a power user on your computer or any kind of hardware, and I think this is Apple's fault, is their file management system. I think what has kind of opened the MPC up, using the MPC software and using the MPC Live as of recently, is they kind of made their file system work a little bit better. So you can just basically hook up hard drives directly to the MPC Live or the MPC X and take sounds directly from your external drives and stuff like that. It makes it so much simpler to just import sounds into the MPC. The iPad is kind of still in the dark ages when it comes to managing your file system. If you don't have root access to the file system, dragging and dropping files into the iPad, you know how just cumbersome and like just stupid it is. You have to open up iTunes, then you have to drag and drop files directly into like app folders, and it just doesn't work right, especially when you're trying to make beats or you're trying to import samples into the iPad itself. So like since I have, for instance, I have let me just cut this out. I have the Beatmaker 3 app and the MPC Pro app together on one iPad. If I wanted to import the same samples to use for both of those apps, I would have to open up iTunes and basically duplicate those file transfers into each app folder, and that's just kind of stupid, I think. Of course, this is not the app's fault. I think it's like how Apple, like I said, manages their file system. It's just ridiculous. I mean, there are some companion kind of apps or third-party apps you can use, like iFile and what is the other one? iExplore. And you can load these on your computer, and then when you hook up your iOS device, you can kind of have a better, I guess, look at what the file system looks like on your iOS device. But unless your iPad isn't jailbroken, then you don't have root access to a lot of things. And then some of the apps, they don't really let you delve deep into, or Apple anyway, it doesn't let you delve deep into your file system on your device. And, like with the new iPad Pro that just came out, you're spending $800 to $1,500 on this product that is fully capable of running full versions of software, basically. But now we have to kind of settle for these dumbed down versions of whatever it is that we're using, whether it's the MPC or machine, or even if you're just like an illustrator or a creative professional, you have to kind of use these slimmed down versions of Adobe Premiere or Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever it is, when you have this device that's fully capable of running full versions, or not even just full versions, but maybe like a better version, not like a tablet version of these programs. And also, like Apple, they really suck when it comes to, say, if I wanted to use the dongle on my iPad and maybe connect like an external thumbnail drive, it won't read it off the drive. So like, it's just kind of like, okay. Same with, I think the new iPad Pro, I know it has USB-C now, but you can hook up a USB-C dongle and then hook up like a hard drive or a thumbnail drive, and it won't read off of it, which is, if you're already working on stuff on your computer and you kind of want to transfer it over, you would still have to hook up your device directly to your computer, then open up iTunes and kind of move files over, which is really stupid. But, I guess maybe Apple will improve upon this stuff later when they have more powerful iPads that come out, or devices, which is kind of leaning towards that way. Well, hopefully Apple kind of opens up and stops being dicks about stuff, especially their file system. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I know this video has been kind of long about just me talking about apps without even creating anything on it, but hopefully those apps might help you in your day-to-day work production, as well as just being creative, just having fun with stuff. Maybe in another video, I'll actually make a beat or something just using the iPad, utilizing some of the apps on here. But thanks again for tuning in. Peace.